Heat doesn't kill the way most people imagine. For most people, there's no dramatic collapse, no obvious warning. It builds quietly, one small mistake at a time. A fan running in a room that's already too hot. A glass of water that never gets refilled. A medication no one realized could increase heat risk. A phone call to an older parent that never got made. By the time it becomes an emergency, the decision that caused it often happened hours earlier. And that's what makes extreme heat so dangerous. It doesn't usually arrive like a heart attack. It quietly pushes the body past its limits until there's very little time left to react. Here's something that surprises almost everyone. Extreme heat kills more Americans each year than hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods combined. Yet most of those deaths are considered preventable, not through expensive equipment, not through complicated medical treatments, but by avoiding 5 surprisingly common mistakes that millions of well-meaning people make every summer without realizing the risk. According to the CDC, more than 700 people die from extreme heat in the United States every year. Adults over 65 account for roughly 40% of those deaths. That's far higher than their share of the population. Not because older adults are weak, and not because summer suddenly becomes dangerous after retirement. It's because aging quietly changes how your body responds to heat. You sweat less efficiently. Your blood vessels don't expand as easily to release heat. And perhaps most importantly, your sense of thirst becomes less reliable. In other words, your body may already be overheating before it sends you a warning. There's another finding that deserves far more attention. A large study following Medicare beneficiaries for nearly 20 years found that heat waves don't simply increase deaths during the hottest few days. Their effects can continue long after the weather improves. Researchers found higher death rates throughout the following year, largely because extreme heat places extra strain on the heart, lungs, kidneys, and brain. The heat wave may end, but for some people, the damage has already begun. And before this video is over, I'm going to show you one mistake involving something that's probably sitting in your medicine cabinet right now. It's so common that millions of Americans use it every day, yet very few people realize it can quietly increase the danger during a heat wave. You probably won't find a warning about it on the label, and during a busy prescription pickup, it's rarely something anyone has time to explain. So stay with me, because those 2 minutes could end up being the most important part of this entire video. I'm Dr. William Mercer. For years, I've reviewed research on healthy aging and heat-related illness with one goal: turning complex medical science into practical advice you can actually use. No products, no programs, just 5 common mistakes, why they happen, how to avoid them, and exactly what to do if you ever find yourself facing one. But before we begin, there's one simple idea that makes everything else easier to understand. Your body has its own built-in cooling system. It works mainly in 2 ways. First, you sweat. As that sweat evaporates, it carries heat away from your body. Second, the tiny blood vessels near your skin widen, allowing heat from deep inside your body to escape into the air. When you're younger, those systems usually work remarkably well. As we age, they gradually become less efficient. We tend to sweat less. Our blood vessels don't widen as easily, and our sense of thirst becomes less dependable. That means you can already be dehydrated before you ever feel thirsty. There's another piece of the puzzle that catches many people off guard. The temperature on your weather app doesn't tell the whole story. Humidity changes everything. Sweat only cools you if it can evaporate. When the air is already full of moisture, that process slows dramatically. Your body keeps producing sweat, but much less heat actually leaves your skin. That's why the heat index, often called the feels-like temperature, is usually a much better measure of real danger than the air temperature alone. A 90-degree day with very high humidity can place more stress on your body than a dry 100-degree day. Now, none of this means you should fear summer. It doesn't mean your body is fragile. It simply means your margin for error is smaller than it used to be. And that's exactly why these 5 mistakes become so important after 60. There's one more reason heat waves have become increasingly dangerous. It's something many people never think about: the nighttime temperature. Most of us assume the body recovers after sunset, but it only recovers if it actually has a chance to cool down. During many modern heat waves, especially in cities, the temperature barely drops overnight. A bedroom that stays in the mid-80s for hours denies your body the recovery time it desperately needs. That's one reason several days of extreme heat become much more dangerous than a single hot afternoon. Your body starts each new day already carrying yesterday's heat. Some people also need to be especially cautious. If you have heart disease, your heart already works harder during extreme heat because it's pumping extra blood toward your skin to release warmth. If you have kidney disease, both dehydration and drinking too much fluid can become serious concerns. People living with diabetes may sweat less effectively, and as you'll see shortly, millions of people taking common prescription or over-the-counter medications face an increased heat risk without even knowing it. If any of those describe you, don't let them scare you. They're not reasons to avoid summer. They're simply reasons to prepare a little better than you might have years ago. And perhaps more importantly, they're reasons for family members and friends to know what to watch for as well. Because sometimes the person who notices the warning signs first isn't the one experiencing them. Now let's look at the first mistake. And surprisingly, it's responsible for more heat-related deaths than any other mistake we'll discuss today. Not because people don't care, but because they don't recognize what's happening until valuable time has already been lost. Most people think heat illness is one condition. It isn't. There are two very different stages, and knowing the difference can save a life. The first is heat exhaustion. This is your body's early warning system. You may notice heavy sweating, cool or clammy skin, a rapid but weaker pulse, dizziness, nausea, muscle cramps, extreme fatigue. The good news is that heat exhaustion is often reversible if you act quickly. Move somewhere cool. Rest. Drink fluids if you're fully alert. Give your body time to recover. But here's where many emergencies begin. The second stage is heat stroke, and it can look very different from what most people expect. Instead of sweating heavily, the skin may become hot, flushed, and sometimes surprisingly dry. Confusion often appears. Speech may become slurred. Body temperature can rise above 103 degrees. One moment, the person seems only slightly tired. The next, they're struggling to answer simple questions. Heat stroke is no longer something you manage at home. It's a true medical emergency, just like a heart attack or a stroke. If you suspect heat stroke, call 911 immediately. Don't wait to see whether it gets better, because with heat stroke, every minute matters. Here's what many people get wrong. They wait for pain, the way you would with a broken bone or a pulled muscle. But heat stroke usually doesn't announce itself with pain. It announces itself with confusion. The person may seem unusually quiet. They may struggle to answer simple questions. They may repeat themselves. Or they may insist they're perfectly fine, when they clearly aren't. That's what makes heat stroke so dangerous. The person experiencing it is often the last one to realize how serious the situation has become, which means the responsibility often falls on the people around them. Imagine someone like Frank. He was in his early 70s. One summer afternoon, he spent several hours working in the yard. Nothing unusual. It was the same routine he'd followed for years. That evening, his wife noticed he was quieter than normal. He answered questions a little more slowly. He seemed distracted. She assumed he'd simply worn himself out in the heat. So did Frank. But over the next hour, his confusion became much more obvious. Looking back, they both realized the warning signs had started long before either of them recognized the emergency. What could have been an early trip to the emergency room became a much more serious situation. Stories like this are more common than many people realize, and there's another reason they happen. Many people who grew up in the 1950s and 60s were taught not to complain, to push through discomfort, to tough it out. In many parts of life, that's an admirable quality. During a heat emergency, it can become a dangerous one. If you're someone who tends to say, "I'm fine," even when you're not, or if someone you love always minimizes how they're feeling, remember this: heat stroke is not the time for toughness. It's the time for action. So here's the takeaway. If someone develops confusion, slurred speech, or hot, flushed skin during very hot weather, don't wait to see if it improves. Call 911 immediately. Those symptoms should always be treated as an emergency. Now, let's move to the second mistake. This one surprises almost everyone because it involves something sitting in nearly every home, something most of us automatically switch on the moment a room starts feeling uncomfortable: an electric fan. Most people assume that if a fan feels cooler, it must be making the room safer. That's only partly true. According to guidance from organizations including the CDC, the EPA, and the World Health Organization, once indoor temperatures climb into the 90s, relying on a fan alone may no longer be enough. In very hot conditions, the moving air can actually blow heat across your body faster than your body can get rid of it. At the same time, it can increase evaporation and contribute to dehydration. That's why simply feeling air on your skin doesn't always mean you're cooling down. Now, there's an important detail here. More recent studies suggest that fans can still be helpful in certain situations, especially if you also wet your skin. The moving air helps that moisture evaporate, which improves cooling, particularly in humid weather. There's also a remarkably simple technique used during military hot weather training: cooling your forearms. Blood vessels run close to the surface there. Submerging your forearms in cool water for several minutes can help lower body temperature surprisingly quickly. It's a simple trick, but one that's worth remembering. Even so, the safest general rule remains the same. If you're over 65, a fan should never be your only plan during extreme heat. Think of it as an extra tool, not your primary protection. Air conditioning, or spending time in a properly cooled building, remains much more effective when temperatures become dangerously high. Here's where many people make the mistake. They treat a fan as if it's simply a cheaper version of air conditioning. It isn't. If your home doesn't have air conditioning, it's worth knowing where your nearest cooling center is before the next heat wave arrives. It could be a library, a shopping mall, a community center. Many cities open these locations during heat advisories, but they're most useful when you've planned ahead, instead of searching for one after you've already started feeling sick. So remember this: once a room reaches around 90 degrees, a fan alone can become a false sense of security. And that brings us to the mistake I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, the one hiding inside millions of medicine cabinets. This surprises even some healthcare professionals' patients. Because these medications are so common, almost nobody thinks to connect them with heat. Several widely used medications can reduce your body's ability to stay cool. Diuretics, often prescribed for high blood pressure or fluid retention, increase fluid loss. Beta blockers can reduce how effectively your blood vessels release heat. Common antihistamines, including many over-the-counter allergy medicines and sleep aids containing diphenhydramine, can reduce sweating. Certain antidepressants and antipsychotic medications may also interfere with your body's natural temperature regulation. ACE inhibitors and ARBs, two very common blood pressure medications, can also affect fluid balance during extreme heat. Here's what makes this especially important. Many older adults aren't taking just one of these medications. They're taking several. A diuretic for blood pressure, an antihistamine for allergies, an antidepressant prescribed years ago. Each medication makes perfect sense on its own. None of them were prescribed because of heat. But together, during a heat wave, they can place extra strain on your body's cooling system. Now, let me be absolutely clear. This is not a reason to stop taking any of these medications. Many of them are essential. Stopping them suddenly can be far more dangerous than the heat itself. The goal isn't to stop your medicine. It's to understand that you may need extra precautions. Drink water before you become thirsty. Choose air conditioning over a fan whenever possible. Avoid strenuous outdoor activity during the hottest part of the day. Imagine someone like Susan. She took a fairly typical combination of a diuretic for blood pressure and an antihistamine during allergy season. She'd never connected either medication to hot weather. Why would she? Nobody had ever mentioned it. She wasn't being careless. She simply didn't know there was anything to watch for. If you regularly take one or more medications, here's one simple question worth asking your doctor or pharmacist at your next visit. Given the medications I take, is there anything special I should do during extreme heat? It's a simple question. Most healthcare professionals are happy to answer it. The surprising part is that very few people ever ask. So here's one sentence I'd like you to remember. Some of the most commonly prescribed medications in America can quietly increase heat risk, and many people never realize it. Let's pause for just a moment. We've already covered 3 mistakes: waiting too long to recognize heat exhaustion becoming heat stroke, relying on a fan when the room is already dangerously hot, and overlooking medications that quietly make it harder for your body to stay cool. Notice what all 3 have in common? None of them feel like major mistakes. They're ordinary decisions, the kind people make every day. And that's exactly what makes them so dangerous. because by the time they seem important, the consequences have often already begun. The next mistake is even more common because it starts with something almost everyone thinks they're doing right. Before we move to the final mistake, let's clear up one myth, because believing this one mistake changes everything you've heard so far. Myth: if I'm not thirsty, I'm probably hydrated. It sounds reasonable, but it isn't true, especially after 60. Here's the reality. Thirst is a delayed signal. By the time your brain tells you it's time to drink, your body may already be running low on the water it needs. In other words, dehydration often begins long before you ever feel thirsty. That's why waiting for thirst during a heat wave isn't the safest strategy. A much better habit is to drink small amounts of water regularly throughout the day, even if you don't feel like you need it yet. For many older adults, having a glass of water every hour or two while awake during extreme heat is a simple habit that can make a meaningful difference. Now, here's the fourth mistake. At first glance, it doesn't seem very important, but over the course of a hot afternoon, it can quietly push your body in the wrong direction. Alcohol and caffeine both have a mild diuretic effect. That means they can increase fluid loss at exactly the time your body is trying to hold on to every drop. Now, this doesn't mean one morning coffee or one evening drink is automatically dangerous. The real mistake is believing those drinks are keeping you hydrated during extreme heat. They aren't. Many people judge hydration by one simple question: how much have I had to drink today? But that's only half the picture. The better question is, what have I actually been drinking? If a large part of your fluid intake comes from coffee, alcohol, or other drinks that work against hydration, your body may still be falling behind. During a heat wave, plain water should be your first choice. And if you've been sweating heavily, especially after gardening, walking, or spending time outdoors, your body loses more than just water. It also loses important electrolytes like sodium and potassium. That's one reason heat cramps can happen, even in people who believe they've been drinking enough. After prolonged sweating, a drink containing electrolytes may replace those losses more effectively than water alone. Think about someone like Diane. She loved spending summer afternoons working in her garden. She almost always had a tall glass of iced tea beside her. She genuinely believed she was staying hydrated. But week after week, she developed headaches, felt lightheaded, and often became dizzy by late afternoon. She never connected those symptoms to the very drink she believed was helping her. She wasn't ignoring her health. She simply misunderstood what her body actually needed. So here's one sentence worth remembering. On an extremely hot day, water is the one drink that's always working in your favor. There's also a quick way to check whether you're keeping up with hydration. No special equipment, no expensive device. Just pay attention to the color of your urine. Pale yellow, similar to the color of straw, usually suggests you're well hydrated. Dark yellow or amber often means you're falling behind. It's not a perfect test. Certain medications and vitamins can change urine color, but for most people, it's a much more reliable signal than simply waiting to feel thirsty. And now, we come to the fifth, and perhaps the most important mistake of all, because this one isn't really about protecting yourself. It's about protecting someone else. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Many heat-related deaths don't happen outside. They happen indoors, inside quiet homes, inside apartments. To people living alone, people who didn't want to bother anyone, people who believed they'd be fine until tomorrow, and, sadly, people no one thought to check on. That's one of the hardest realities about extreme heat. It often becomes deadly in complete silence. This isn't just a sad story. It's something researchers have documented for decades. After the devastating Chicago heat wave of 1995, which claimed hundreds of lives, researchers found something remarkable. Social isolation turned out to be one of the strongest predictors of who survived and who didn't. Often, it mattered even more than age or existing medical conditions. People who had family checking in, neighbors stopping by, or friends calling regularly were far more likely to survive than those facing the exact same heat completely alone. That's one reason the CDC specifically encourages checking on older neighbors, friends, and family members during periods of extreme heat. Not because it's simply a thoughtful thing to do, because it genuinely saves lives. And if you do check on someone, try asking better questions than, "Are you okay?" Most people will answer, "I'm fine," even when they aren't. Instead, ask something specific. Is your air conditioning working? Have you had enough water today? Have you been outside in this heat? Do you need anything from the store? Those questions tell you far more than a simple yes or no ever could. So let me ask you something. During the last heat wave, did you check on anyone who lives alone? A parent, a neighbor, a friend, someone you know is getting older? If not, consider doing it the next time temperatures begin to climb. Because sometimes a 5-minute phone call can become the reason someone makes it safely through the week. Now let's step back and look at the bigger picture. These 5 mistakes may seem completely different. Waiting too long to recognize heat stroke, trusting a fan when the room is already dangerously hot, overlooking medications that increase heat risk, choosing the wrong drinks, forgetting to check on someone who lives alone. But they all point to the same lesson. Heat rarely becomes dangerous all at once. It builds quietly, one ordinary decision after another. And that's exactly why it's so preventable. You don't need complicated equipment. You don't need medical training. You simply need to recognize the danger before it becomes an emergency. If there's one message I hope stays with you after this video, it's this. Heat-related illness is one of the most preventable causes of death we face. The science is already clear. Doctors understand the warning signs. Researchers know the risk factors. The problem isn't a lack of information. The problem is that too few people ever hear it in a way that's practical enough to remember on a hot summer afternoon. Before we talk about what to do during an actual heat emergency, let me leave you with a few simple habits that can make every summer safer. If possible, plan outdoor activities for the early morning or later in the evening instead of the hottest hours, between about 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. Wear lightweight, loose-fitting, light-colored clothing whenever you can. During the day, keep blinds or curtains closed on the sunny side of your home to block heat before it builds up indoors. Then, once the outdoor air cools after sunset, open the windows if it's safe to do so, and let the cooler air move through your home naturally. If you need to be outside during a heat advisory, whether you're gardening, walking, or simply running errands, don't try to do everything at once. Break the job into shorter sessions. Spend a little time outside, then come back indoors to cool off before heading out again. Many people think the goal is to finish the task. During extreme heat, the real goal is to give your body enough recovery time to keep your core temperature under control. Those short cooling breaks can make a much bigger difference than most people realize. And before you head out, check one number that many people completely overlook. Not just the temperature, the heat index. That's the feels-like temperature you see in most weather apps. It combines heat with humidity, making it a much better measure of how stressful the weather will actually be on your body. A day that's 90 degrees can feel much more dangerous if the humidity is high. So during a heat wave, pay closer attention to the heat index than the temperature alone. There's one more warning that's too important not to mention. Never leave a child, an older adult, or even a pet inside a parked vehicle. Not for 5 minutes. Not for just one quick stop. Not even if the windows are cracked open. The temperature inside a parked car rises astonishingly fast. Within just 10 to 15 minutes, the inside of that vehicle can become life-threatening, even when the weather outside doesn't seem extreme. There simply isn't a safe amount of time. Now, let's talk about what to do if the worst happens. If you believe someone is experiencing heat stroke, don't wait. Call 911 immediately. While help is on the way, move the person into shade, or even better, an air-conditioned space. Remove extra layers of clothing. Then, begin cooling them as quickly as you safely can. Place cool, wet towels on their body. Apply ice packs to the neck, under the arms, and around the groin if they're available. If possible, use a cool bath. And remember the simple technique we discussed earlier. Cooling the forearms and wrists in cool water can help lower body temperature while emergency help is on the way. If the person is awake, fully alert, and able to swallow safely, offer small sips of water. But if they're confused, vomiting, having trouble staying awake, or unconscious, don't try to make them drink anything. At that point, your priorities are simple. Keep cooling them, stay with them, and follow the instructions from the 911 dispatcher until help arrives. If it's heat exhaustion instead, heavy sweating, weakness, muscle cramps, or nausea without confusion, move into a cool place. Rest. Sip water slowly. Elevate the feet slightly if comfortable. Most people begin feeling better fairly quickly once their body cools down. But if symptoms don't noticeably improve within about an hour, or if they begin getting worse at any point, treat it as a medical emergency and seek immediate medical care. Before we finish, I'd like you to do something simple. Picture one person. Maybe it's your mother, your father, a neighbor who lives alone, a friend who's taking some of the medications we discussed today, someone who might not realize how dangerous the next heat wave could be. When this video ends, don't just think about them. Reach out, send them this video, or better yet, call them. Because during extreme heat, the greatest protection often isn't an air conditioner or a fan. It's another human being who cared enough to check. And if you're struggling to think of who that person should be, ask yourself one question. Who would you regret not calling if you found out something had happened tomorrow? That's probably the person you should contact today. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these 5 mistakes surprised you the most? Was it number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely read them, and they often inspire future videos. One final reminder. Everything we've discussed today is meant for education. It isn't a substitute for advice from your own doctor, especially when it comes to medications or your personal medical conditions. And if you ever suspect someone is experiencing heat stroke, don't wait to see if they improve. Call emergency services immediately. That's always the safest decision. My goal with this channel is simple: to take reliable medical research, strip away the complicated language, and turn it into practical advice that helps you protect yourself and the people you love. I'll leave you with one last thought. Heat doesn't announce itself the way most emergencies do. It doesn't usually come with sirens or obvious warning signs. It waits quietly for one ordinary mistake, one missed warning, one delayed decision. Now you know the 5 mistakes that matter most. Don't carry that knowledge as something to fear. Carry it as a habit, one that could protect you or someone you care about the next time temperatures begin to rise. Until then, take good care of yourself. Check in on someone you love this week, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dr. William Mercer.